penguin eggs and other bird eggs. They're studying if the climate, carbon dioxide, the ozone hole, things like that are making the shells thinner and not generating as much calcium, and is that impacting the penguin population and more of them dying and things like that. So that's part of the long-term studies they're doing. There's also a lot of fishing down there. You know, Chilean sea bass comes from this area, and they're in danger of being overfished. This is a cod, horrible tasting thing, oily, not good for barbecues. This guy is actually, none of these fish have blood, they have antifreeze. The compound in their system is literally the same compound of antifreeze you put in your car in the wintertime. That's why they look more white in some cases. But they're studying how they can survive in that cold temperature. This telescope we built a couple years ago, and I've already talked about the thin air and all that stuff and why it's an important place. And they've discovered 5 galaxies here in the last 3 years. And this is it there. And also there in the middle of winter. But you can just imagine how bright and brilliant that sky is and how many stars you can see. Our ships do a lot of sailing out in the water, and they'll do various kinds of collection and whatnot, and they find things, these little octopus and whatever else that they're dragging up. And then the people that I hire to send down there are the people that actually make all this stuff work and make it easy for the scientists to go down and do their research. So whether it's cooks or machinists or a plumber fixing something under a building or digging out a building, or firefighter, or this gal has been running that bulldozer for 35 years, building runways and snow roads. There's just all kinds of things that the workforce does down there that you don't think about very often. But 3,000 of our employees go down every year and help support the program. We also use alternative energy where we can. Solar panels are good for some of the small field parties that go out, because you can get enough energy to run a laptop or run a radio sometimes. They also have little diesel generators with them too. Or we can use, these are some windmills that we've tied into the McMurdo electric grid, and it does help to provide energy, just like those windmills that you find over in Cheat Mountain and here in West Virginia. They look very similar. And really, there was just a couple of these I wanted to point out. These are some of the jobs that my people do. And medical, I hire 8 doctors a year and a dentist that go down to Antarctica. We've got a small clinic, but those people are all triage people. They will stabilize somebody until we can get an airlift to get them up to New Zealand where they can get real hospital care, because we don't have the facilities down and the equipment down there to really support somebody that's seriously injured for very long. Sometimes we'll have appendicitis cases, sometimes we'll have broken legs, you know, just things like that. We do have bars, as I mentioned earlier, and a retail store and recreation. And the one thing on the waste management I wanted to mention is that we recycle 65% of everything that goes down there is recycled and brought back to the U.S. for sale. It's a very amazing program, and anybody that's in it really tends to become anal when they come back home and it comes to recycling in their home. There's a place to put everything. I'll give you one more story and then I'll close it up here. The 300 Degree Club. This is a special club that you have to winter over at South Pole in order to join this club. And what it is when in the dead of winter, usually in July, if the air temperature outside gets below 100 degrees, minus 100, the people in the station, the men and the women, will crank up their sauna to 200 degrees. They'll leave their boots on, but to take all their clothes off, and when they're good and hot and sweaty, they'll run outside the station and go run completely around the geographic center of the Earth, so they're running around the world with a 300 degree temperature change. And no, I don't belong to that club. And we haven't lost anybody yet, but we've had 70-year-old people doing that. So I'll leave you last with, this is me standing at the foot of a 150-foot glacier that's moving down the side of a mountain. And for the 20 years that I worked in Antarctica, I was very fortunate to have a mountain named after me. That's over in the dry valleys where I used to do a lot of flying. So that's a little legacy I have for the Feolas. So that's it. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer. I know it's late and I probably ran over a little bit, but be happy to answer anything anybody has. Yes?
Does the movement of the ice affect like the South Pole Station, the building itself? What happens?
Good question. Does the movement of the ice affect the building itself? And the answer is yes, it can, a little bit. I didn't show the picture, but underneath the station there's a series of tunnels that have been dug with a special piece of equipment. And it's just enough to kind of stand upright and walk through with maybe a foot on each side. And that's where we run our wastewater and our water that we melt to bring into the station. You know, South Pole is unique since we don't have an ocean nearby. We have to melt all the water to drink, shower, cook with, and that sort of thing. So they actually drill a well. They drill a hole down 300 feet. It's out away from the station a little bit. And they put a heating element down inside and a pump. And this thing will last maybe 2 or 3 years. And it will melt about 1 million gallons of water in this big dome, in this big bubble, and they'll pump that up and into the station. So we have these pipes that run through these tunnels, and as the ice is moving, sometimes it starts to buckle and could even break one of those pipes. Once you finish one of those holes and you no longer are melting water out of it, you've gotten all the water that you can from it, they abandon that hole and they go somewhere else to build the next one, drill the next one. So what you do is with all the waste from the station, human waste, food waste, all that stuff, you pump that back into the hole that you just left, this big huge bulb that's now empty, and that's where all the sewage and gray water and stuff goes back into, and 200,000 years from now it'll plop into the ocean somewhere. But it does move, and in fact we've had, it's funny because this is all snow under there in these tunnels, and they'll start to buckle in, and you're walking down there and you run into the side of it where it has buckled in, and somebody will come along later with a plane or something and shave it off and make it straight again. But they do move. What other questions? Oh, I'm sorry, up there.
Do you still work for Raytheon, or is it?
Do I still work for Raytheon? The answer is no. I retired in June. And so I'm no longer involved in the Antarctic program. And this year, I'm kind of glad of it. Unfortunately, and some of you may already know this, but because of the government shutdown, they've also had to shut down the Antarctic program this year. They've just got an email from a friend of mine yesterday that they notified all the scientists that they're bringing them off the continent and flying them back out in the next few days because of the government shutdown. And it is causing a significant uproar in the science community because some of these guys have been going down there for 35, 40 years. And there's some science that's been done since 1957. And now they're going to have a break in the historical record of all this data that they've been collecting. And the scientists are saying, you just tossed away millions of dollars because it doesn't mean anything anymore. If you have a break in this historical record, now we have lost our baseline. So unfortunately, that has happened in the last 2 days. It's a very sad thing. Now, if Congress gets their act together in the next week, maybe they'll be able to send a few of the scientists down. But I think out of the 200 projects, if they get a handful, they'll be lucky.
Will anybody remain?
Will anybody remain? The answer is yes. You still have to keep the station going for 2 reasons. One, you don't want some other country to come in behind you and take over the hundreds of millions of dollars you put in down there. And there are some instruments and experiments that you can keep, if you can keep the heat and the lights on, you can still run those experiments. So we are leaving, I think they said, probably about 85 people at McMurdo this winter, and maybe 40 at South Pole, which is about less than half of what they usually do. But yeah, you still leave people down there. Yes,
Global warming has been concluded to be real then?
is global warming real? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, by the science.
I refuse to answer that question. You know, honestly, sport, that's one of the things that the scientists are fighting about every day. And I've just read some articles in the last 2 weeks where one group has come out and said, yes, it's man-made, man is causing global warming. And another group says, well, we're not really sure because we don't have all the data. A lot of people have the theory that it's a natural cycle of the Earth to go warm and cold, which is true, and they've proven that in the records. But I personally think that man is helping to accelerate it. I don't know that man is actually causing it. I think it's just a natural cycle of the Earth. But I think if we live long enough, we're going to see some pretty darn interesting things, particularly in the Arctic, because the Northwest Passage is open for the first time in the history of mankind that we know of. So that's pretty amazing stuff. When a lot of that ice melts in the Arctic, what's that going to do to the spinning and the balance of the Earth? You know, I don't know. Maybe that's when all of the seasonal things start to shift, and your growing belts start to shift, and suddenly the United States isn't as good a shape as other parts of the world. So there's a lot to be concerned about. I saw some hands over here. That young fellow over there.
Since the compass always points north,
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
since the compass always points north, if you put it right on the South Pole, would it spin around?
I still didn't get it. Can somebody help me with that?
Compass, what happens to a compass at the South Pole?
Ah, what happens to the compass? Oh, that's a good question. As a aviator, I can tell you that it just sits there and spins. So you don't know which way you're going, except when you're down that far south, everything is north. But the compass is useless. And so what they do, when I was flying back in the Navy, we didn't have all of this GPS stuff that everybody's got today. So we relied on what we call grid navigation. And that meant that you really learned what the topography looked like. And so you could find your way around just by knowing that that mountain is this, and that stream is that, or this, and that sort of thing. Today, they've got GPS. You can use satellites. The airplanes have it. The helicopters have it. It's very easy to navigate various points. So, yes?
The volcano right there at McMurdo, are there other volcanoes that are active in Antarctica?
Okay, are there other volcanoes?
Earthquakes, so what-
There are no other active volcanoes in Antarctica. That is the only one.
Have
Now-
you experienced earthquakes?
Pardon me?
Has there been any recorded earthquakes?
Yes, every once in a while they can record some earthquakes. One of the things that they have found is underneath all that ice, there are what they think are some lava flows underneath the ice in certain areas. It's not a volcano exactly, but the molten lava has come up close enough to the top of the Earth's crust that it is heating some of the ice underneath, and that's what's causing some of it to move faster than other areas. Yes?
Is most of the exposed landmass basaltic, meaning that it's all from volcano eruption? Is it igneous?
I think most of it is igneous, except at McMurdo Station. That is volcanic. But when you get over to the dry valleys and see some of those where the granites are and the various layers of the rock, it's a different story over there. Yes?
I saw he showed fossils of like leaves or dinosaur fossils.
Yes.
Is there a lot of evidence, or how much evidence that at one time it was a entirely different environment?
I will tell you, you remember that one picture that had all that ice flowing down over the mountains? Off to the right of there is an 11,000-foot mountain. I landed a helicopter and landed in the midst of a petrified forest. There were all these logs. They were about that big, but just rows and rows of petrified wood. So at one time, that whole Antarctic was all jungle, vegetation. So yeah. Yes, sir.
When you were showing us the cod and the fish and the antifreeze in it, has anyone ever considered, like, have you guys ever caught something like a coelacanth?
Taught what?
A coelacanth, fish. You ever caught one of it?
I'm sorry, it's really hard for me to hear up here, but I don't understand your question.
Coelacanth fish, is it?
The what?
Coelacanth is a fish?
The which camp is a fish?
The oldest fish.
Oh, the oldest fish?
The oldest fish. Have you ever caught one?
I don't know that answer.
Sorry.
I don't think nobody's ever caught what you would consider a prehistoric fish like you do sometimes in the deep ocean. Nobody's ever seen anything like that. The one thing that I have heard is that a lot of the fish in the Antarctic tend to be a lot larger than your normal fish. Yes. I don't know if I call it a jungle, but certainly heavily wooded forest. Well, it's cold now, but 10 million years ago it wasn't that cold maybe, back in the early days of the earth. I think we're going to have to wrap up here. I can see.
You're getting the hook.
Well, I just really want to, on behalf of all of us here, thank you. We almost felt like we were there without having to wear all of those heavy warm clothes. Thank you so much. There is a reception in the room right next door in the Greek Alumni Room, and you can ask more questions and find out a little more interesting, and also thank him in person. On behalf of all of us, thank you so much.